We all encounter toxic people at some point in our lives. Those who drain our energy, sow doubt, or stir conflict. How we respond to them says a lot about our emotional intelligence and self-respect. Smart people don't waste their time trying to change toxic behavior in others. Instead, they focus on protecting their peace and setting clear boundaries. They understand that their energy is precious and that how they engage with toxicity shapes their well-being and growth. First, smart people recognize toxic behavior without denial or justification. They don't make excuses or hope the person will change overnight. Instead, they see the patterns clearly and acknowledge the impact on themselves. This awareness is the foundation for healthy responses, because you cannot protect yourself if you don't see the danger clearly. Second, they set firm but respectful boundaries. Boundaries are not walls meant to punish others, but guardrails that keep relationships safe and healthy. Smart people communicate what is acceptable and what is not, and they stand firm even when met with resistance. These boundaries are acts of self-love, not aggression. Third, smart people limit their exposure. They understand that sometimes the healthiest choice is to step back or distance themselves from toxic influences, whether temporarily or permanently. Protecting their mental and emotional space is not selfish, it's necessary for thriving. Fourth, they cultivate empathy without enabling it. They may recognize the pain or struggles behind toxic behavior, but they don't allow that empathy to become a license for mistreatment. Smart people hold compassion and accountability in balance, knowing that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing their well-being. Fifth, they don't engage in toxic dynamics. Instead of getting pulled into arguments or emotional manipulation, smart people maintain their calm and choose responses that reflect their values. They refuse to play the game of blame, defensiveness, or drama, keeping their integrity intact. Finally, smart people invest in their healing and growth. They surround themselves with supportive relationships, practice self-care, and continually develop emotional resilience. This inner strength acts as a shield and a beacon, guiding them through challenging interactions with grace and wisdom. Toxic people will always test our limits, but how we respond defines our peace and power. Choosing awareness, boundaries, empathy, and self-care isn't just smart, it's transformative. It's how we protect ourselves and create a life where kindness and respect flourish. Recognizing toxic behavior is the crucial first step in protecting yourself and maintaining your well-being. It requires clear-eyed honesty and a willingness to see things as they are without the comforting but dangerous fog of denial or justification. Too often, people make excuses for harmful behavior because they want to preserve relationships, avoid conflict, or hold on to hope that things will change. But this denial only keeps us trapped in cycles of hurt and confusion, leaving us vulnerable to repeated harm. Seeing toxic behavior clearly is an act of courage because it means confronting uncomfortable truths about people we care about and about ourselves. Toxic behavior isn't always obvious or overt. It can be subtle and insidious, like persistent criticism, manipulation, passive aggression, or emotional withholding. Sometimes it shows up as boundary crossing, disrespect, or patterns of inconsistency and unpredictability that leave us anxious and uncertain. Recognizing these signs requires emotional awareness and self-reflection. It asks us to pay attention to how interactions leave us feeling drained, anxious, confused, or diminished. Our feelings are often the earliest and most accurate signals that something is off. Clear recognition also involves resisting the urge to explain away or minimize harmful actions. It's tempting to say they didn't mean it or they're just having a bad day, but repeated patterns cannot be dismissed so easily. When harmful behavior becomes a pattern, it's a red flag, signaling deeper issues that are unlikely to change quickly or without effort. Acknowledging this reality doesn't mean we hate or reject the person. It simply means we protect ourselves by naming what is harmful. Seeing toxic behavior clearly empowers us to make informed decisions. Without awareness, we risk falling into the trap of self-blame or confusion, questioning if we're overreacting or if the problem lies within us. But when we recognize the toxicity, we can shift from self-doubt to self-protection. This shift allows us to reclaim our emotional power and start setting the boundaries necessary for our health. Recognition also helps us avoid enabling. When we deny or justify toxic behavior, we inadvertently permit it to continue. This can happen in families, friendships, workplaces, or romantic relationships. The desire to maintain connection or avoid upheaval can blind us to the ongoing damage. But true strength comes from seeing clearly and refusing to tolerate harm, no matter how painful that clarity might be. This clarity requires us to separate who the person is from what they are doing. Recognizing toxic behavior doesn't mean demonizing someone, but rather understanding that behavior is not the full measure of a person. People can be struggling, hurting, or unaware of the impact of their actions. Holding this perspective keeps us compassionate, but not complicit. We maintain respect for their humanity while choosing to protect our boundaries. It's also important to recognize that our own past experiences and vulnerabilities can influence how we perceive toxic behavior. Sometimes we may tolerate more harm because of past trauma, low self-esteem, or cultural conditioning that teaches us to prioritize others' needs above our own. Recognizing toxic behavior thus also involves self-awareness. Acknowledging where our patterns might make us more susceptible in committing to healing and growth. By recognizing toxic behavior clearly, we lay the groundwork for all the steps that follow. Setting boundaries, limiting exposure, balancing empathy with accountability, and ultimately choosing peace and growth. Without this recognition, we remain at the mercy of harmful patterns and lose sight of our worth. In essence, recognizing toxic behavior is an act of self-respect and empowerment. It requires bravery to look honestly at the ways others affect us and to admit when those effects are damaging. It frees us from the confusion and self-doubt that toxic dynamics breed and opens the door to healthier choices. This clarity is the foundation for protecting our peace and building a life where kindness and respect are the norm, not the exception. Setting firm and respectful boundaries is a powerful expression of self-love and a crucial step in dealing with toxic people. Boundaries are the invisible lines that protect our emotional, mental, and physical well-being. They tell others how we expect to be treated and what behaviors we will not tolerate. For those who understand their worth, setting boundaries isn't about creating walls to shut people out. It's about drawing guardrails that keep relationships safe, healthy, and respectful. Boundaries are the foundation on which smart people build their interactions with toxic individuals, preserving their peace and integrity. When we encounter toxic behavior, the natural reaction might be confusion, hurt, or even anger. But setting boundaries transforms those emotions into clarity and action. It is a conscious decision to stop allowing harm and to communicate clearly what is acceptable and what is not. This clarity prevents toxic patterns from continuing unchecked. It helps us avoid the exhausting cycle of giving in to others' demands or tolerating disrespect because we are uncertain where the line is drawn. Firm boundaries require confidence and consistency. It's not enough to express a limit once and then waver when challenged. Toxic people often test boundaries repeatedly, attempting to push past limits or manipulate us into lowering them. Smart people understand that boundaries are not negotiable pleas. They are commitments to self-respect. Standing firm doesn't mean being harsh or aggressive. It means holding a space that honors our values while respecting others. Saying no without apology and yes when it aligns with our well-being. Respectful boundaries also mean communicating those limits with kindness and honesty. How we deliver our boundaries can influence how they are received. When expressed calmly and clearly, boundaries invite understanding rather than defensiveness. This approach reflects emotional intelligence. It acknowledges the humanity of the other person while prioritizing our own needs. It shows that we value both the relationship and ourselves. Setting boundaries is a learning process that requires self-awareness. We must first understand our needs, triggers, and limits. This self-acknowledge is essential because without it, our boundaries may be vague or inconsistent, which leaves room for toxic behavior to seep through. Reflecting on past experiences can reveal patterns where boundaries were crossed and where we felt depleted or disrespected. This reflection guides us in defining clear and realistic boundaries moving forward. It's important to remember that boundaries are personal and flexible to some degree. What one person considers a firm boundary might differ from another based on their history, values, and comfort levels. The key is that boundaries are authentic to our experience and protect our well-being. We are not required to meet others' expectations if they compromise our peace. Loving ourselves means honoring our unique limits and communicating them unapologetically. Sometimes setting boundaries leads to resistance or backlash from toxic individuals. They may react with anger, guilt-tripping, or attempts to undermine our limits. This is often because boundaries threaten their control or the dynamics they have relied upon. Smart people prepare for this possibility by reinforcing their commitment to self-care and seeking support from trusted friends, mentors, or professionals. They understand that maintaining boundaries is a process that might involve discomfort, but ultimately leads to freedom. Boundaries also empower us to choose the level of engagement we have with toxic people. Setting limits on what topics we discuss, how often we interact, or what behavior we will tolerate creates a safer emotional environment. It helps prevent burnout and preserves our energy for relationships that are nourishing and reciprocal. These choices are acts of kindness toward ourselves, ensuring we do not sacrifice our well-being to appease toxicity. In essence, setting firm and respectful boundaries is a declaration of self-worth. It tells the world and ourselves that we deserve kindness, respect, and safety. This declaration is transformative because it changes the dynamics of our relationships and reshapes how toxic people can influence our lives. Boundaries are not barriers to connection, but invitations to healthier, more authentic interactions. By embracing boundaries, we reclaim our power and protect our peace. We stop reacting impulsively to toxicity and instead respond thoughtfully, aligned with our values. This practice leads to a life where respect is non-negotiable and where we can thrive without being diminished by others' harmful behavior. Limiting exposure to toxic people is one of the most effective strategies smart people use to protect their emotional and mental well-being. Recognizing that some relationships are harmful is the first step, But understanding when and how to create distance is what preserves peace and fosters growth. Toxic individuals can sap our energy, cloud our judgment, and pull us into unhealthy dynamics if we allow them too much access to our lives. Smart people prioritize their health by consciously choosing to limit interactions or, when necessary, stepping away completely. Limiting exposure doesn't mean we have to sever every connection immediately or act out of anger. It's a deliberate, thoughtful decision based on self-respect and self-care. Sometimes this means reducing the amount of time we spend with toxic individuals, avoiding certain topics that ignite conflict, or setting clear limits on communication. Other times, it may require more definitive boundaries, such as cutting off contact or distancing ourselves from people who consistently disrespect or harm us. The reason limiting exposure is so crucial is that toxic behaviors often thrive on frequent interaction. The more time we spend engaging with negativity, manipulation, or criticism, the more our sense of self-worth can erode, our emotional resilience has limits, and continuous exposure can wear down even the strongest among us. Smart people recognize this reality and protect themselves by managing the frequency and intensity of these interactions. Sometimes limiting exposure is not just about others, but also about protecting our inner space. Toxic people can invade our mental and emotional boundaries through persistent demands, emotional manipulation, or by stirring up drama. Smart individuals cultivate awareness of how these interactions affect them internally and take steps to shield their inner peace. This may include practices like mindfulness, meditation, or seeking support from trusted friends and professionals to maintain balance. It's important to acknowledge that limiting exposure can be challenging, especially when toxic people are family members, colleagues, or longtime friends. There can be feelings of guilt, obligation, or fear of confrontation that makes stepping back difficult. However, loving yourself enough to prioritize your well-being means recognizing that you cannot pour from an empty cup. Setting limits on your time and energy is not selfish, it's necessary. Smart people also recognize that limiting exposure is a dynamic process. It may look different depending on the situation and can change over time. For example, a toxic relationship may require strict distance during particularly harmful periods, but may allow for more interaction in healthier times. The key is that the person remains in control of these decisions, not the toxic individual. This autonomy is empowering and reinforces self-respect. Another important aspect is that limiting exposure sends a clear message to toxic people. It communicates that their behavior has consequences and that you are unwilling to tolerate harm. This message is often more powerful than words because it reflects action grounded in self-care. While some toxic people may resist or try to manipulate you into more contact, maintaining limits is a way to protect yourself and uphold your boundaries. Limiting exposure also opens up space in your life for positive influences. When you reduce the presence of toxicity, you create room for relationships that nourish, support, and inspire you. This shift not only improves your emotional health, but also allows you to thrive personally and professionally. Healthy relationships act as a buffer against stress and contribute to a more fulfilling life. It's essential to prepare for the emotional impact that limiting exposure can bring. There may be feelings of loss, sadness, or loneliness, especially when distancing from someone you care about deeply. These feelings are natural and part of the healing process. Smart people honor these emotions while remembering the long-term benefits of protecting their well-being. Ultimately, limiting exposure is a self-empowering choice. It prioritizes your health and happiness and respects the limits of what you can manage emotionally. This strategy is about balance. not avoidance out of fear, but deliberate protection out of love. It allows you to engage with the world on your terms and maintain your peace in the face of toxicity. By limiting exposure, smart people safeguard their energy, maintain clarity, and create boundaries that support growth. This practice is a vital component of how they navigate difficult relationships while staying true to themselves. It's a commitment to living a life where respect and kindness are the norms, not the exceptions. Balancing empathy with accountability is one of the most nuanced and important skills when dealing with toxic people. It's a delicate dance of understanding the pain or struggles that may underlie someone's toxic behavior while also refusing to accept that pain as an excuse for mistreatment. Smart people know that compassion doesn't mean allowing themselves to be used or disrespected. Instead, it means holding space for others' humanity without sacrificing their well-being. Empathy allows us to see beyond the surface and recognize that toxic behavior often comes from wounds, trauma, or unmet needs. This perspective can soften our judgment and open our hearts to understanding rather than resentment. We may realize that the person acting out is hurting, confused, or trapped in unhealthy patterns themselves. When we cultivate empathy, we connect with the deeper story behind the behavior rather than simply reacting to the. However, empathy alone is not enough to protect us. Without accountability, compassion can easily become enabling. Enabling occurs when we excuse bad behavior, cover up consequences, or take responsibility for someone else's actions. This only prolongs toxicity and keeps both parties stuck. Smart people recognize the difference between empathy and enabling, and they set limits accordingly. Accountability means holding toxic people responsible for their actions without becoming their caretakers or enablers. It means making it clear that while we understand their struggles, we will not accept disrespect or harm. This can be communicated through clear boundaries and consequences when those boundaries are crossed. Accountability is an act of self-respect and respect for the other person's capacity to change. Balancing these two, empathy and accountability, is challenging because it requires emotional maturity and strength. It demands that we maintain our boundaries while extending kindness. This balance prevents us from becoming either too harsh or too permissive. It allows us to engage with toxicity in a way that honors both our well-being and the complex humanity of others. One way smart people achieve this balance is by cultivating emotional intelligence. They listen deeply to their feelings and intuitions about what is safe and healthy. They are honest with themselves about what they can tolerate and where they must draw the line. This self-awareness supports wise decisions about when to engage, when to step back, and when to let go. It's also important to remember that accountability isn't about punishment or control. It's about creating space for growth and change, both for ourselves and others. When toxic people are held accountable, they are invited to reflect on their behavior and its impact. Sometimes this leads to healing and transformation. Sometimes it means ending a relationship that can no longer be healthy. Either outcome supports our journey toward peace and integrity. Compassion balanced with accountability also helps us avoid resentment. When we enable toxic behavior out of misplaced empathy, bitterness can build up inside us. This resentment poisons our emotional health and damages the relationship further. But when we set clear boundaries and hold others accountable, we reduce the chance of hidden anger or frustration growing unchecked. This balance also protects us from emotional manipulation. Toxic people often use guilt, blame, or other tactics to evade responsibility. When we stand firm with empathy and accountability, we are less likely to be drawn into these manipulations. We respond from a place of strength rather than reactivity, which diffuses the power toxic people hold over us. Ultimately, balancing empathy with accountability is an act of radical self-love. It says, I see your pain, but I also see my worth. It honors both our compassion and our need for safety. This balance is not easy, but it is essential for maintaining our peace and dignity in the presence of toxicity. By holding both empathy and accountability, smart people navigate difficult relationships with grace and wisdom. They protect their hearts without shutting down compassion. They create relationships that encourage growth and respect, while safeguarding their well-being. Avoiding engagement in toxic dynamics is a critical strategy that smart people use to protect their mental and emotional well-being. Toxic individuals often thrive on conflict, drama, and manipulation, drawing others into patterns of blame, defensiveness, and chaos. Choosing not to participate in these dynamics requires discipline, awareness, and a deep commitment to maintaining one's peace. It is a powerful form of self-respect and a way to break free from cycles that can feel exhausting and destructive. Toxic dynamics often involve getting pulled into arguments where the goal isn't resolution, but control or escalation. The toxic person may provoke, gaslight, or twist words to confuse or destabilize others. When we engage in these interactions, we give power to the toxicity and lose sight of our values and calm. Smart people recognize this trap and choose instead to remain calm, detached, and grounded. They refuse to be baited into reactive or defensive behavior. Avoiding engagement doesn't mean ignoring problems or refusing to communicate. Rather, it means choosing how and when to respond, prioritizing clarity and calm over impulsivity or emotion-driven reactions. It might involve walking away from a heated conversation, taking time to collect one's thoughts, or simply refusing to answer provocations. This approach maintains personal integrity and prevents toxic cycles from spiraling out of control. This practice also involves recognizing when the conversation or interaction is no longer productive or safe. Toxic people may use emotional manipulation to draw others into repeated conflicts or guilt trips. Smart individuals set limits around these interactions, protecting their boundaries by disengaging when necessary. This might mean limiting contact, avoiding certain topics, or, in extreme cases, cutting off communication altogether. Maintaining this stance requires emotional resilience and self-awareness. It can be difficult not to respond when provoked, especially if the toxic person is someone close or someone with power in one's life. But every time we choose not to engage in toxic dynamics, we strengthen our emotional muscles and reclaim control over our responses. This choice fosters peace and prevents the emotional drain that toxic interactions cause. Avoiding toxic engagement also helps us preserve our sense of self. Toxic dynamics often distort reality and sow doubt about our perceptions and feelings. When we disengage from these patterns, we protect our clarity and self-trust. This clarity is essential for maintaining healthy relationships and for making wise decisions about when and how to interact with difficult people. It's important to cultivate communication skills that support this avoidance without alienation. Smart people learn to set boundaries with kindness and assertiveness. They express their limits clearly and calmly without aggression or defensiveness. This kind of communication helps prevent misunderstandings and reduces opportunities for manipulation. It models a way of being that invites respect and discourages toxicity. Avoiding engagement also signals to toxic people that their tactics will not succeed. When they realize they cannot provoke the reactions they seek, their power diminishes. This often leads to a decrease in toxic behaviors or pushes them to confront their issues in healthier ways, although that is not guaranteed. Either way, maintaining this boundary protects us from harm. This strategy is not about winning or proving a point. It's about preserving inner peace and protecting one's energy. Engaging in toxic dynamics drains our emotional resources and distracts us from what truly matters. By refusing to participate, we reclaim time and energy for ourselves, our healing, and the relationships that nurture us. Ultimately, choosing not to engage in toxic dynamics is a radical act of self-care and self-respect. It honors our right to peace and our commitment to living authentically. This choice helps us break free from destructive cycles and build a life grounded in calm, clarity, and healthy connection. By mastering the art of disengagement, smart people navigate toxic relationships with wisdom and grace. They protect their hearts and minds, creating space for healing and growth. This practice is essential for anyone seeking to live with integrity and emotional freedom. Investing in your healing and growth is the foundation upon which smart people build resilience when dealing with toxic individuals. This commitment to self-care and personal development acts as a shield, helping to buffer the negative impact toxic relationships can have on mental and emotional well-being. Instead of allowing toxicity to define their sense of self, smart individuals prioritize nurturing their inner strength and cultivating a life that supports their highest good. Healing from toxic experiences begins with acknowledging the pain and damage caused by such relationships. This acknowledgement is not a sign of weakness, but of profound courage and honesty. It involves facing uncomfortable emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal, and grief, and allowing oneself the time and space to process these feelings. Avoiding or suppressing these emotions only prolongs suffering and makes it harder to move forward. Smart people understand that healing is a journey, not a destination, and that self-compassion is critical throughout the process. Growth accompanies healing by encouraging individuals to learn from their experiences and develop healthier patterns moving forward. This growth includes developing emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and manage one's own emotions, and to empathize with others. Emotional intelligence fosters clearer boundaries and better communication, which are essential in navigating or exiting toxic relationships. It also helps build self-awareness, which is key to recognizing red flags early and protecting oneself proactively. Another vital aspect of investing in healing and growth is surrounding oneself with supportive, positive relationships. Toxic people often isolate us or make us doubt our worth. Smart people counteract this by seeking connection with those who uplift, respect, and encourage them. These relationships provide emotional nourishment and a safe space for vulnerability and authenticity. They remind us of our value and provide a mirror reflecting our true selves. Self-care is a practical expression of this investment. It involves daily habits and rituals that nurture mind, body, and spirit, whether that's exercise, meditation, creative expression, or simply rest. Self-care restores energy depleted by toxic interactions and strengthens resilience against future challenges. It is an ongoing commitment to treating oneself with kindness and respect. In addition to personal practices, professional support can be invaluable. Therapy, coaching, or support groups offer tools and guidance to process trauma, rebuild self-esteem, and learn strategies for managing toxic relationships. Smart people recognize when they need help and seek it without shame, viewing support as a strength rather than a weakness. Investing in healing and growth also means setting long-term goals for the kind of life and relationships one wants. It's a commitment to personal transformation that goes beyond reacting to toxicity and moves toward thriving despite it. This forward-looking perspective fosters hope and motivation, reinforcing the belief that a better, healthier future is possible and within reach. This investment reshapes identity. Instead of defining oneself by toxic experiences or others' behaviors, smart individuals develop a sense of self rooted in strength, dignity, and authenticity. They reclaim their narrative, choosing how they see themselves and how they allow others to influence their lives. This empowered self-view supports healthier choices and attracts more positive experiences. Moreover, investing in healing and growth creates ripple effects. As individuals heal and thrive, they inspire others to do the same. They become role models of resilience and self-love, showing that while toxic people may cross our paths, they do not have to dictate our journey. This influence contributes to building communities grounded in respect, empathy, and emotional health. Ultimately, prioritizing one's healing and growth is a profound act of self-love and courage. It's a declaration that one deserves peace, joy, and authentic connection. It's the ongoing work that empowers individuals to set boundaries, limit exposure, balance empathy and accountability, and disengage from toxic dynamics effectively. This inner work is the key to maintaining well-being and thriving no matter what challenges arise. By investing deeply in their healing and growth, smart people build the resilience necessary to navigate toxic relationships with grace and strength. They cultivate a life where respect, kindness, and authenticity flourish, creating space for genuine happiness and fulfillment. This commitment to self is the greatest gift one can give to oneself and the foundation for lasting peace. Thank you for taking the time to explore this important journey of understanding how to deal with toxic people wisely and compassionately. Remember, recognizing toxic behavior, setting firm boundaries, limiting exposure, balancing empathy with accountability, avoiding toxic dynamics, and investing in your healing and growth are not just strategies. They are acts of profound self-respect and empowerment. By embracing these principles, you reclaim your peace, protect your energy, and create space for healthier, more authentic relationships. This path requires courage and patience, but every step you take brings you closer to the life you deserve, a life marked by kindness, clarity, and inner strength. Good luck on your journey toward healing and empowerment. Thank you for listening.